and we're going to do a brief introduction of each person. So if you guys don't mind introducing yourselves. David, would you start?
Absolutely. Thank you. Very pleased to be here. I'm David Barkmak. I am a partner in the labor and employment practice at a firm called Mintz, which is a national firm. I happen to be based in Washington, D.C., but we have offices up and down the East Coast and the West Coast. And among other things, we are counsel to the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers, which is how I got introduced to your group. And obviously, I think it should be obvious that in recent weeks and months, I've been spending a huge proportion of my time answering questions about COVID-19 related issues and the impact of the pandemic on the workplace. And I hope to be able to answer some of your questions today.
Awesome. Thank you. Neal?
Yep. I'm Neal McConnico. I work for Clan Land Insurance in Memphis, Tennessee. 95% of what I do are appliance, furniture stores, and or appliance service people throughout the country. I, like David, have been spending a great deal of time reading and answering a lot of questions regarding this virus. And is it covered for business income? Is it not covered? What can we do? So hopefully I can answer some of those questions and look forward to the call tonight.
Awesome. Thank you. Terry?
My name is Terry Griffith, and I'm the founder of the Griffith CPA firm in Memphis, in the Memphis area. We're in South Haven, Mississippi, and we've been in business 32 years, and we deal with small businesses, you know, tax issues. We also have a bookkeeping side of our business, as well as tax problem resolution. So glad to be here and glad to have the opportunity to talk to you. Hopefully we can add to the conversation.
Perfect. Thank you. Doug? Is Doug muted?
He is muted.
Yep, he's muted.
Okay. I think Doug's frozen as well. Okay, well, we have Renee now. As soon as Doug gets back in, we'll introduce him. He is a service company owner with A Action Appliance, and he has been affected by COVID. So he is our representative for the industry as our servicers and as our members this evening. So Renee, if you're ready.
How about now?
Awesome.
Perfect. Had to switch things up at the very last minute with the computer that did not want to cooperate. So now I'm on my phone. So if there's any problems with hearing me, please stop me and let me know. So let me see if I can get one adjustment here. Bear with me one moment.
David, we can start with you. I know you wanted to discuss real quick. You had some things you wanted to discuss with our members first before we got started.
Yeah, I just thought really, Sarah, that I would take really just a couple of minutes to give you an idea of what we're seeing and what we're advising clients. What I'm going to touch on has broader application than just your industry, so that many of you, hopefully all of you, have been able to continue work, at least in some measure, even if not at your usual pace. Many of our clients are not even in that situation. But let me talk very, very briefly about what we're seeing and what we're talking to them about. So the big issue for clients right now is returning to work, or returning at least to the office. Many of them are working, but are working remotely. And even for you all, you may have some of your staff working remotely, and I'm not talking about service people, but back office folks and others may be working remotely. And what we're seeing is that many jurisdictions are allowing people to begin to return to work, but with lots of conditions. In some cases, so many conditions that it becomes almost impractical to allow people to come back. And what we're encouraging clients to do is to get ahead of the curve as much as possible, to think about how they can reopen once the order comes out. So for example, if you're in a jurisdiction that is putting limits on the number of employees that can return to the workplace, for example, Massachusetts recently has said you can, starting Monday, you can have people back, but you can't have more than 25% of your people back. That means you have to think about how you're going to accomplish that. Are you going to have everybody come back, but only some of the time so that they're working in shifts? Are their shifts going to be, you know, one 8-hour period during the day and then another 8-hour period the same day for another group? Or are you going to have, as some clients are doing, people come back for 2 weeks and then work from home or be furloughed for 2 weeks and have another cohort of people come in for another 2 weeks? All of that requires thinking. You must continue to maintain social distancing. So if you're doing social distancing, how do you accomplish that if you are in an office space or other facility that has cubicles close together, for example? What about doing screening? Some jurisdictions, San Diego, for example, is requiring that you do temperature checks. Many other jurisdictions aren't requiring it, but are suggesting some form of screening. If you do screening, that has all sorts of implications. Some of them have to do with what information can you keep? Is it medical information, or are your employees entitled to privacy with respect to that information? But there are also implications such as under the Fair Labor Standards Act, if you've got somebody waiting in line to get their temperature taken and to fill out a form answering questions about whether they have symptoms or not, do they have to be paid for that time? What kind of personal protective equipment must you provide? What kind of cleaning do you have to do? All of these kinds of things are issues that are created by this unfolding over time of a return to the workplace, where that's going to be done in stages. If you have laid off or furloughed people and you extend those layoffs and make them, if you've laid off permanently, that's one thing. If you've furloughed people or done so-called temporary layoffs, if you extend them and they become permanent, those have implications as well. For example, under something called the WARN Act that requires notification to be given to government authorities and to the employees about their permanent layoff. The issues are coming at us fast and furiously as each state, or in some cases localities, cities, roll out executive orders that deal with these issues in slightly different ways. And for that reason, what we're recommending, and very strongly, is that you sit down, you look at what your city or state are recommending, what their orders are providing for, so that you can come up with a plan beforehand as best as possible to deal with these issues.
Thank you, David.
Okay, so I'm without a doubt struggling a little bit today. So hopefully that'll be my last adjustment that I'll have to make to be able to get this started. I apologize to everybody who showed up on time. My computer just suddenly decided to die. So I wanted to start with Doug. Doug, what are you doing, and how is it working out to control and minimize liability when you enter the home? What are you instructing your technicians, and what kind of concerns do you have there?
I think that we realized right out of the gate that communication was going to be pretty key. Explaining to the customers and our technicians what to expect. And what we found was it gave our customers a lot of peace, that we were taking it very seriously. And, you know, we kind of took the guidelines from the Whirlpool servicer, authorized servicers agency, asking those wellness check questions. And we decided early on not to go into people's homes. I was a little worried about that, hitting the news for the guy who wouldn't go fix the refrigerator for the poor little old lady. But things went pretty well. So yeah, it's those guidelines and having weekly meetings with our technicians by phone, which we've been doing for years because our company is a remote. Our technicians work remotely from their home. So it's just a constant reminder. And I'd say over these last few months, maybe 5 incidences, which I think I'm pretty happy with. Individual situations where things got a little hairy or dicey, misunderstandings, and we just apologized and made things right as best we can.
Good, good. So expanding on, you had said that your technicians work from home. How are you being able to screen them to make sure that they're not exhibiting any symptoms, on the daily? What are you doing there?
Well, we reassured them that at any time, so they have to self-monitor themselves each morning. Pre-COVID, if somebody was on vacation and somebody got sick, that was my worst day ever, trying to figure out how to take care of all those customers and try not to be bitter and angry. So now I have superpowers, right? I'm ready for pre-COVID again. I can handle anything. But so self-monitoring is important. And each time we've had about 3 technicians have some symptoms of maybe possible COVID. None of their doctors would allow them to be tested. And so we just kept them home for 2 weeks and paid them.
Gotcha. I wanted to go to Dave with this next question. Expanding on what we're already doing in the industry, what precautions can business owners take when we enter a home of a customer who maybe is uncomfortable that we're there, maybe is uncertain, technician is also uncertain? Going into a customer's home daily, what can we do to mitigate the possibility of a claim that we've infected somebody while we were in the home? Tell us what you think, Dave.
Well, I think the most important thing to do is to make sure that the technician is well schooled in what the best practices are in terms of social distancing, in terms of wearing properly their personal protective equipment and so forth. I think is what is most likely to provide comfort to customers that the company that the technician works for and the technician himself is being careful, thoughtful, respectful of their space, trying very, very hard not to infect them, and frankly, not to get infected if the customer or somebody in the family is infected. I think that's the most important thing you can do.
Okay, thank you. Terry, this next question, I wanted you to talk about a little bit the financial implications of COVID on our industry. What measures can business owners take to prepare for this should we have to go through this again or something similar in the future?
Well, frankly, we're seeing the companies that are surviving, that are getting through this, are the ones that break it down to bare bones and spend money just on very necessary things. I think you got to decide what's a want and what's a need as far as your business is concerned, and just be very conservative. This is the time for being very conservative, making sure you've got some cash set aside. Cash is king right now. So I know when this first hit, I talked to my partners here, and there was a question of, all right, where are we cash-wise? As far as credit lines are concerned, our question was, should we draw those down now so that we've got this cash reserve sitting in our left hand if we need it? So you just got to get to bare bones, get to very necessary things, because who knows how long this is going to affect all of us. If they don't come up with the vaccine, then this is really going to get drug out for quite a while. So you've got to be prepared to go for the long haul.
Okay. How do we prepare for the long haul? Is there a formula, or is there something we can look at going backwards to say this percentage of my income will sustain me through a month of this, through 3 months of this? What can business owners do to actually prepare that way? What are we missing in that equation?
I think you got to figure out what your fixed costs are, which I think is one of the questions a little bit later on. But figure out what your fixed costs are. The cost you're going to have, even if you don't open the door that day, even if you don't get out of bed, these are costs that you're going to incur. And so figure that out and then build from there, and just add only the necessary costs after that, variable costs, okay? But find out what your fixed costs are. What is your baseline? In other words, what is the monthly nut that I got to take care of to keep this place open if no money's coming in? And that's, you can look at your bookkeeping going back, and you can figure that out fairly easily.
Should we as business owners identify key employees that we must keep on the payroll, that they cannot be laid off? Is that something that you think we should make an effort to identify if we have to go around this merry-go-round again?
Absolutely. You want to know, if you've got to cut to bare bones, who are the people that I need to run this place? Who are the ones that are operatives, is what I call them, okay? The ones that are, and you know it probably in your own business. I know it in my business. I know who my operatives are, and then I know who basically the people are that I could do without, okay? Might not be fun, okay, but that I could still run the business without.
Gotcha.
But yeah, you've got to. I think you got to figure that out quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Neal, next set of questions. I want to talk about a little bit about the insurance industry. And I know some companies were doing some refunds. Some insurance companies were doing some refunds of premiums partially, and in an effort to help. Do you think that was enough? Do you think that we need to go further with those? Should insurance companies be helping out more?
I think they should where they can. My personal insurance company has given 20% back. And you've seen the commercials out there with all the big insurance companies. So far, I've mainly seen that on personal automobile, not so much on the commercial side of things. They're assuming that people are still working. But at the end of the day, you still run a risk of that car burning. That probably has not changed a whole lot since the virus. You run a risk of it being stolen. There's a lot of other coverages and perils that apply versus just driving to and from work every day. And certainly that risk is lower. And that's why most of them have given anywhere from 15 to 25%. And maybe what you don't know is the fine line. They're saying of April and May's monthly premiums if you pay it that way, or they're breaking your automobile down into 12 payments. Certainly, could they do more? I'm sure the whole world can probably do more, knowing what we're up against today with this pandemic. So
sure. What has been the overall impact on your industry, insurance in general, seeing that COVID has affected everyone in different ways? Tell us what impact it's had on your industry.
I personally don't even think we've seen the fallout of my industry yet. And what I mean by that, workers' comp premiums are going to be lower. We're going to have to refund people aren't paying employees. Certainly the whole, I'm not sure the business income has really been determined yet. I'm sure the Supreme Court will be hearing some of that. Maybe David can elaborate on some of that. Just like the terrorism after 9/11 kind of changed our world, I believe this will change our world. I think there's new coverages that will come out to pick up coverages or events like this happening in the future. I think the real our industry is probably 6 to 12 months and maybe longer from really knowing the downfall of this virus and how it's going to affect us.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there are some things we want to touch on later on in our conversation about insurance and how they're going to deal with the pandemic issues. Terry, going back to you for a minute, as business owners, are we going to be able to weather the storm with the PPP that was, rolled out, that plan that was rolled out to us, and the other forms of government incentive? Is that going to be enough, or is it just not going to cut it for what we're seeing?
If you could tell me when we're going to have a vaccine, I could really answer that question better. But assuming we don't have something like that on the near horizon, it's not going to be enough. We've already seen clients who've gone out of business, who shut their door, because they were on the edge anyway, and then to have to only operate at 50% capacity for a lot of businesses, they're not going to make it at 50%. So it's not enough. I think there's going to be a lot, and there's a lot being talked about. There's a lot of programs that everybody's kind of throwing out there in the tax world. I know we laugh because we hear about all these tax bills that everybody is working on. There's no sense studying them too much until they get passed, because most of it doesn't get passed. And so there's going to be more, and there's a lot of things that the government is very concerned about. Just in general, they're concerned about riots in the streets. They're concerned about that, because if this goes on long, you're going to have the have-nots coming after the haves. And when that happens, you got major social breakdown. So there's going to be a lot more. There's all sorts of things that are being tossed around. It'll be interesting to see what happens here in an election year. Sure.
Doug, what's been the hardest thing for you to deal with and cope so far? What has been the biggest challenge you're seeing on the daily?
I think as news and information comes out, customers and employees change their perspective and their point of views. And for me, I just have to continue to dance along and try to make get the customers taken care of, take care of our employees, and keep the company running. So, for instance, 3 technicians said they would never wear a mask, and 3 now wear masks. And then I have some guys that say, I will not wear one at all. And so now we have to kind of navigate that when we're booking appointments and let customers know through our script. So, do I want to get frustrated at times because it's at the worst moment that this poor customer can't get serviced? I just have to kind of be filled with grace and understand that both sides, all 3 sides, have an important part to play.
Sure. So are they wearing masks now? Did you say that they are, or are they still confusing?
Well, we edited about halfway through this, maybe somewhere in the beginning of April, about masks and gloves. We part of our script, in addition to it, was that we explained to our customers that some of our technicians choose to wear masks and gloves, and others would rather practice social distancing. And then from there, the CSR listens and then responds accordingly. I've had employees change their mind if somebody had COVID and it's now been more than 2 weeks or more than a month, or going into retirement villages and homes. Everybody's opinions are changing, and so I just have to remember that we're just getting through a pandemic. So we'll just do our best. And so there's a lot of apologizing to a customer to reschedule them for another day for a different technician, those kinds of things. Just navigating an incident each as they go along, and understanding that I've got no strong opinions either way. I'm going to respect everybody's perspectives here.
Gotcha. That's a hard position to be in.
I'm tired.
I'm sure. Dave, going on to talking about our limitations as far as business owners and what we can and cannot do. I want to talk about that for a little bit. When asking customers health questions, whether they're minimal health questions or, there are things that we have to know in order to enter the home. Talk to me about where we're pushing that line. Are we within our rights to question customers about their, whether or not they're infected or have they been infected, and so on and so forth? Can you speak on that for us?
Yeah, so interestingly, there really is no law that relates to asking customers as opposed to employees about their health and getting customer health information in this context. So, I think, subject only to exercising reasonable judgment, and, I would certainly limit myself to questions that are relevant based on the science as we know it, and that's, published by the CDC. I think it is appropriate legally for you to ask a customer, we just want to confirm, have you or anyone in your home in the last few days had any of the following symptoms? Has anyone been diagnosed with COVID? We want to make sure that the premises are safe for our technicians. I think that you can legally do that.
Okay. So the question that everybody has had in the back of their mind this whole time is, are we violating HIPAA? So you're saying no.
Yeah, so HIPAA actually correct. So HIPAA actually applies to health plans and to healthcare providers. So given your business, if all you're doing is asking those questions, you're not engaging in medical exams, you're not recording and keeping the information, your HIPAA is not actually implicated.
Gotcha. So expanding on that just a little bit and talking about taking temperatures, there's been a lot of discussion about taking temperatures for our technicians going into the field and this sort of thing. I know that the EEOC, I read that they said it was permissible for us to take temperatures as long as we didn't discuss that information and we kept it private. But given our situation, if I take a temperature of a technician and he is running a fever and I immediately send him home, doesn't that send that information and that kind of imply that he, was running a fever? How am I protecting his privacy, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So really the only concern in that regard is that if you're maintaining the information, so for example, you are logging each day an individual's temperature, that information must be kept separate from their personnel file and from other information, just like you would keep any medical information for an employee. They submitted to take some form of medical leave, you keep that information separate. You treat this writing down of their temperatures the same way. If all you're doing, as most of my clients who are taking temperatures are doing, is not maintaining any information, but they're using a point and shoot body thermometer, they pointed it at the forehead without touching the person, they look, if it's under 100, or in some people are using under 100.4, no issue, the person goes on. If it's over that, they send them home. And it's sort of period, end of discussion. They don't need to log the day-to-day. He was 98.6 today and 99 the day before that. If they do that, they need to keep it separate. But that's really, under the EEOC guidance, that is really the only constraint on doing those forms of tests. Okay.
Would you recommend that we keep a log then or not for future reference?
I don't personally see, I'm not a doctor, but I don't see any benefit in keeping a log. What's the advantage of knowing that somebody was 97 on one day and 97.8 one day and 98.2 the next day? Seems to me not to be helpful and therefore not required information. Obviously, what I would be sure to know is what was the day that the person was above that 100.4 and that I sent him home, so that you know how long if you're sending him home and requiring 14 days of quarantine, you need to know that date. If you're just sending him home until he's asymptomatic, that's another matter. But I think that's all you need to do. I don't see any particular need beyond that to, frankly, keep a log of the information.
Okay, thank you. Doug, bounce to you just for 1 second. Are you having any of your employees take their temperatures before they report to work?
Some of them are. I feel like, this is for some of you guys in the different industries. I feel like me demanding it and then they don't do it, then I'm sort of in that no, that it's not happening. So all I can say is that if they have a cough or anything, I'd rather just pay them and just pay them and keep them, quarantined for 2 weeks. And I just haven't had any troubles with that. So I don't know. How would I be able to keep up with what they're doing with that?
Gotcha. Okay. Throwing this out to basically everyone at once. When you bring your employees back to work, after they've been quarantined for 14 days, should you go ahead and require them to have a negative test also, or just let them return after 14 days? So I'll throw that out to you first, and Doug.
My state has just really started getting tests that are readily available. I know some states have the drive up thing that just happened a couple weeks ago. So we've had one employee turned away at emergency room and said, go home. And the other 3 called their doctor and said, what would you like me to do? And they just said, stay home for 2 weeks. And then I requested a letter from the doctor so that we can get that tax credit at the end of the year as we're paying them for their time off.
Gotcha.
So the Emergency Care Act.
Gotcha.
The EEOC and the CDC are asking employers not to require a test or a doctor's note in order for an employee in that situation, Renee, that you described, to come back. And originally the concern was that doctors were too busy on the front lines. A lot of them, don't have the time to give you a test or write you a note. And now I think as much as anything, the concern is there's just not enough easy availability of tests. So under the CDC and EEOC guidance, it should be sufficient. If you've sent somebody home and they're quarantined and 14 days later and they're asymptomatic, you should not require that they provide a note.
Okay, good enough. Thank you for that. Neal, some organizations have been able to recuperate from this particular pandemic. Wimbledon comes to mind with they had pandemic insurance, which we were all kind of surprised and I think caught off guard. Do you see this as being something that will be necessary and promoted going forward? Will we see people offering and selling pandemic insurance?
Yes, I absolutely believe that. In fact, I understand there was a new law introduced from a congresswoman in New York today called the Pandemic Risk Insurance Act of 2020. Wimbledon, I think, what they had bought was probably an event policy. I know the language of that policy. I suspect it probably wasn't excluded. And that's maybe how they got this covered. But yes, I do believe that you're going to have to deal with this in the future. I do believe they will start offering this coverage.
Is it going to be affordable? That's my next question.
I believe it will be. Kind of like terrorism coverage is not expensive. May start out a little bit higher on the front end. Employment practice liability started out pretty expensive, but it's pretty cheap now. I think as they learn more about it and as the risk gets spread, I think the cost will come down. But yes, I do believe it's something we'll have in the future, and I think it'll be here very soon.
I would expect a waiting period for that as well.
I suspect they would do it like a 72-hour, kind of like a deductible. They do that on loss of income claims now. Some of them do 48 hours, some of them do longer than that. But yes, I do think there'll be some form of deductible as in a waiting period.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, Terry, going to the PPP subject again. Other forms of assistance for small business. Do you think there'll be additional forms of this rolled out going forward from the government?
I do.
Especially
Absolutely. I do.
if we have a second round of this, do you think this will be something that will be offered again?
I do.
Okay.
The Treasury Secretary has said that, okay? He said, we've got other tools. And so, yes.
Okay. So when they pushed the tax deadline up this year for filing, do you think, I know it was beneficial to a lot of people. Do you think that was something that was beneficial to your industry as well? Did it help you out in terms of trying to get everybody's, I know you worked hard with the PPP and other things and advising customers. Was that just basically, let's push this aside for now and get all this other stuff done?
We were glad that they extended the deadline. I think, frankly, it ought to be an extended deadline every year. I think it would stop all the fly-by-night operations that pop up. Will do your taxes, and then you don't see them again, until the next tax season. Okay,
right.
We're here every day, year-round, and so we're looking for, what I would consider to be a steady, tax season, as opposed to let's try to get it all done in 2.5 months. And so it has definitely helped our workflow here. Okay. Now it's messed up some vacation plans. We get all that, but you know what? Too bad. Okay. We'll work through it, but it's helped us a lot. I'd like to see it continue in the future. The tax preparation business should be a year-round business, not just a seasonal business. And I think it would cut out a lot of the fraud and a lot of the shenanigans that go on with people who pop up and do that. So we're happy to see it. I think that we will see some continued extension of deadlines. They're talking about extending the July 15th deadline to September 15th. That's been discussed. And so who knows? We'll see what they're going to do. But I think we'll see more of it.
Good. Following up on the PPP question, one of the things that I've heard people discussing back and forth is what kind of tax ramifications that might have later on down the line. And I've heard the term free money tossed around when talking about that. Is it genuinely free money, or is it going to be something that later on there's consequences?
Well, it might help me out right now in my business, okay? But who's going to pay for that? Somewhere down the road, we as a society are going to pay for that. I can spend like crazy on a couple of credit cards that I have, but then I got to pay those somewhere down the road. And this is not a new issue at all. They talk about the budget and balancing the budget, and it's just easier for politicians and ourselves, frankly, to kick the can down the road. Say, we'll worry about that tomorrow. And so that's kind of what's really happened here with all the response to the COVID. And so we'll see. I think sooner or later we're going to have to pay the piper. Yes. Might help me out now, but I'm not sure. What about a year from now? Okay.
Right.
Where will it be? Maybe that's your question, but
it is.
I think it's gonna make things. I think we're going to have to decide who the surviving businesses are. And that's, I think the survival of the fittest, so to speak, that's really pretty strong to say it that way. But the businesses that are efficient and run their businesses well, they will continue to be in business. And then the weak will go do something else. So.
Should small business be ready for some sort of, I don't want to use the term backlash, or some sort of consequence of receiving, so many grants and PPP and this sort of thing? Should we be ready for that? Should we prepare?
I don't think it's going to be quick. I don't think it's going to happen within the next, certainly within the next year. We're in an election year, so I don't think we're going to see a lot of things like that happen. But somewhere down the road, just, Congress has got to deal with balancing the budget. This has been going on for 30 years, so it's not something new. It's just gotten exacerbated, certainly by this and by the amount of money that's kind of been thrown out there to everybody.
Gotcha. Thank you. Dave, a few questions for you as well. What is the potential of liability to a business who fires an employee who refuses to return once work is resumed and that employee has no medical reason to not be there? They just don't want to return to work. Could we potentially let that person go? And is there any kind of concern about being sued or anything like that later?
Yeah, the answer to both questions is yes. You can potentially let the person go, but this being America, you should also be concerned about being sued, because that's what people do when they're let go. In most circumstances, it is pretty clear that if the employee is required to return to work, and I'm assuming you have a safe environment, you're taking reasonable precautions to protect them and so forth, and they refuse to do so, you can terminate them for refusing to return to work. Certainly, if they have a medical issue, that's different, and that would be a concern. If they say, I can't return because I'm particularly vulnerable, for example, I suffer from some particular medical condition, that would be an issue. And as with all employment decisions, you have to, of course, treat people equally, in the sense that if you have two people that both refuse to return to work and you're only going to fire one of them, it has to be some independent reason why you're doing him or her and not the other, so that you don't get a discrimination claim.
Gotcha.
So just a quick question about that.
Sure.
In the trenches ourselves. So let's say I have an area of coverage and I have a person choosing not to work, and then I hire two people, one for another area and one for this area that doesn't have coverage. And now that guy wants to come back.
Too bad.
Too bad. So that would be a good reason to say, I found someone to cover that territory that you covered. Is that a viable reason? Okay.
Yes. Now, again, assuming that this is not a person with a disability, some medical condition or something else, right? So if it's just a refusal, I'm not coming back to work, you're within your rights to terminate that person and replace them.
Thank you.
Okay. Expanding on that a little bit, there was some conversation about employees possibly refusing to, admit when they've exhibited symptoms. Where do we stand on that in terms of how much can we enforce and how much can we ask if we suspect but they won't admit?
Yeah, so this is a very difficult issue, and as I think maybe Doug was the one that alluded to this, to a certain extent, you are relying on the good faith and forthcomingness, if that's a word, of your employees. So if you're saying, I want to know if you have symptoms, I want to know if you're running a temperature, you're requiring them to do that. And the reality is, you will never know for sure if they falsely reported to you, because some people are asymptomatic until it's very obvious that they're sick. So the legal answer is that if they lied to you, you could terminate them for doing that. So that if they knew they were running a high fever and you could prove that, and they did not disclose that to you, you could terminate them for that. In the real world, actually proving those things becomes very difficult. We do know one of the reasons we recommend taking temperatures or asking people to take their temperature and asking them to confirm each day that they're not asymptomatic is to really put the burden on them to affirmatively report to you. So rather than say, just let me know if you have symptoms, we encourage employers, wherever it's feasible, to ask somebody to affirmatively each day, as part of the screening process, check the boxes. And there are now actually apps, phone apps people can use for this. They check the box, no, I do not have a cough, I'm not sneezing, I don't have a fever, et cetera, et cetera. If you then find out and can prove that they lied about that, that is a terminable event. And I think it also puts more of a burden on the employee to be truthful about what they're saying, as opposed to where you're leaving it up to them whether to say anything to you or not.
Right. So should we find out that they are positive? What obligation do we have, responsibility do we have to inform our customers that they may have come in contact with?
So this is a little bit similar to the other circumstance where there's no legal obligation that I'm aware of, and I've looked, that requires that you inform your customer that this technician that visited you 2 days ago has, tested positive for COVID. You do have an obligation to take certain steps with respect to your other employees. So if your technician was in contact with other employees, you may have an obligation there. You may have an obligation to report it to OSHA, and you may, depending on your jurisdiction, have an obligation even to report it to your public health authority. But perhaps oddly, the one person you don't have an obligation to tell is your customer. And of course, you never know, was he symptomatic at the time he visited that customer? Were they in close contact and all of that? But in any event, you don't have an obligation to report it to the customer.
Right. Well, a lot of these questions are kind of the things that we're all kind of bogged down in right now, because this being a new and, uncharted waters, as everybody's calling it, we were kind of operating in the dark with a lot of this information. So what you're giving us is very good information. So thank you for that. I wanted to let you know. Going to let me talk with Neal for a moment. I know that I've heard insurance companies are denying claims for business interruption. Speak to that for a moment. Tell us what's going on that they are denying, those claims. With so many people hurting, what produces that outcome?
Certainly, and I've heard that from a lot of people. And of course, there's a lot of different policies out there. But I think the one main exclusion that tends to allow these insurance companies to deny it hasn't directly hit your business. And what I mean by that, it wasn't a fire that destroyed your business. It wasn't a tornado that destroyed your business. Then you bring into the aspect of it the civil authority, and that is covered under most policies for loss of income. And you say, okay, was this a civil authority? And I think the definition there would be, you had a tornado and the area around your business was destroyed, and therefore you couldn't get to your business. I think that would constitute a civil authority, and therefore will not cover loss of income for this pandemic. That is what I'm seeing on most of these policies. And I'll tell you, and David, you may have seen this. Travelers Insurance Company, a law firm out of California, has already filed suit against Travelers, and they're hearing it in the California Supreme Court that they're claiming the virus was real and got into their walls and desk and phones, and therefore it was not excluded, so therefore it should have been covered. I like the argument. I'm just not sure where it's going to end up. And I think we're going to see a lot of that in the future.
David, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, Neal, I agree with everything Neal said. I don't I think time will tell what happens with business interruption insurance and whether some people are able to make coverage claims successfully or not. There will undoubtedly be, we've already started to see some litigation around that.
Sure.
I think there will be more. And ultimately, the courts will determine whether the policies cover or not. One other area that's somewhat related to this, that where we will also, just time will tell what the courts rule. Many contracts, probably many contracts that you all have, not necessarily insurance contracts, but other kinds of contracts, have what are called force majeure clauses, which basically says, in the event of some catastrophic event, for lack of a better phrase, you don't have to perform under this contract. And what we have seen over and over and over again is one side of the contract saying, and of course it depends whose ox is being gored, saying, oh, the force majeure clause doesn't protect you, the pandemic doesn't fit in that definition. And the other side is saying, of course it fits in. I mean, this is an act of God. Nobody could predict this. I should be protected. And that too, I think ultimately will be decided by the courts over years of litigation over the meaning of that clause, the meaning of business interruption provisions in insurance contracts, and time will tell how they come out.
Is this event going to change legislation for us in our country over insurance and things like that? We're going to see a lot of legal cases brought about, whether they're justified or they're, just frivolous cases. But is it going to push some laws to change?
I think almost certainly. I know that in Congress there have already been some proposals, for example, around liability protection arising out of the pandemic. So, which if passed, for example, would mean that your customer could not sue you for allegedly sending a technician who had COVID to their premises. And for that matter, would protect employers from suits other than under the workers' comp laws, from suits by their employees if the employees said that they were exposed in the workplace and that kind of thing. None of those yet have got much traction. Congress's focus has been, as Terry was talking about, on getting money out to people through various of these programs. But I think it may get some traction and there may be some protection ultimately.
Okay. Well, I think that would be good news to anybody in my industry to have that piece of the puzzle off our shoulders, because I know
Absolutely.
It's been for a lot of us. So going back to Doug for a moment. Doug, I know a lot of us have put some safeguards in place. We've been managed to death almost on what we should be doing and all the things, the precautions. But what have you put in place that now that you're going to keep in place long after COVID's over?
I've been thinking about that. I know, I think it's just going to be that personal protection equipment's going to stay with our trucks forever now. I can imagine a year or two from now, somebody has a cough and a customer is going to want us to wear protection. So at this time, that's one of the only things I can think of, really, other than being introduced to Zoom for the first time.
Yeah, it was a learning curve with Zoom. Tell me about the issues that you've had. What would you, if you, knowing what you know now, have done different?
Well, not to make light of things, but I would have got a haircut like early, right before they did the shutdown, because I'm not a hat wearing guy, but I do wear a hat now for 3 weeks. It's bad. It's really bad. No, I think that Jay, the owner of Action, and myself, we thought about in early March, because it was right there in New York City, right around the corner from us. We thought about every possible scenario, from worst case scenario of closing up or being shut down, or and everything in between. I think we were really, really well prepared. And in that sense that we were ready to jump and turn left and turn right and accommodate whoever needs to be accommodated to get the job done. So I'm tired from thinking about all the possible scenarios.
Sure.
But I think that we didn't have our head in the sand, and I hope that, I don't think anybody does now, but no, I think we're blessed to be where we're at right now. We're an essential business, working. Everybody who can work wants to work, and we've got money in the bank, so things are going well.
Good. So I'm going to pose this question to everybody and give everybody a chance to respond. I want to start with Terry. This is the crystal ball question. How long will the recovery take? How long will it take us to fully recover from this?
I think some things have been changed forever. But again, we're back to the vaccine. If you come up with a vaccine, then okay. But absent that, we are years away from totally recovering from this. That's Terry's opinion. So.
Okay. Fair enough. Neal?
I believe we're years away from a recovery. Look what 9/11 did, and it took years to recover, and that really affected New York and a couple other areas. This will affect our whole country, our whole world. I think things are going to be completely different. I'm tired of hearing the new normal. I think it's going to affect the United Servicers and most of y'all's members in a positive way. I understand there's a tremendous shortage of inventory for people buying new appliances, so therefore they may be willing to get them fixed versus throwing them away. But we're going to have new insurance coverages. There's going to be new laws. It's changed the world forever, and I completely agree with that.
Okay. So what do you think, Dave? How long do you think it'll take us to recover fully?
Well, on the economic front, I agree that it's going to be years. I don't know how many years, but it's going to be a long time. And in other respects, I think we will never go back. And I'm glad Neal previewed his distaste for the phrase new normal, because I was going to use it. But I think, in fact, we will never go back to life as we knew it in the workplace. I think there will be a sort of a new normal, whether it's because people like Doug are now requiring technicians always to have PPE with them, or it's because employers are increasingly open to allowing employees to telework, or just employers being more sensitive to the importance of basic procedures, sanitation and health-wise around the workplace. I think inevitably we will all see changes that will be changes that are in place forever going forward in terms of the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Doug, what do you think? How long will it take our industry alone? Just the appliance repair industry. What are you thinking in terms of us recovering from this, given that we were essential throughout the majority of this?
Yeah, I mean, just taking a pulse, being on a Facebook appliance page with 2,000 members on it, it seems like our industry, unlike the restaurant industry, we weren't hampered as much. Now, I don't know about the authorized warranty guys, and if manufacturers slowed them down or not. But Neal was right. I mean, I feel like some repairs are happening because they're not making some parts for appliances. And freezers are at a minimum. Right now, we can't get top load. We sell appliances. We can't get any top load appliance washers right now. And so in our area. So, I mean, yeah, I think we're doing fine. I'm just worried about, I remember seeing this guy make some bad decisions on social media, and somebody pulled the camera out and just lambasted him. He deserved everything he got, but his company went bye-bye. I'm worried about a genuine misunderstanding now or in the future where somebody thinks we're not taking it seriously and then goes and trashes our name. It could put us out of business. So that is a fear I have, and I'm looking forward to that kind of fear going away. But people are super hypersensitive, and I'm just afraid of a reaction. I had an employee I had somebody call me on a Saturday and said, your employee is selling your N95 mask to somebody in a convenience store, and just kind of went on and said, I'm going to trash you all over the internet. I can't believe your guy would do that. He was giving it to his friend that runs the Dunkin' Donuts in the convenience store, and they were, it's his mask, not mine. He was the first,
Right.
my employee, first one to have masks. I couldn't get them. So here's a misunderstanding where a customer took it the wrong way and had a really creepy picture of my technician in his van. That's the stuff that scares me, is social media and a little mistake just blowing up on us. So that's what I worry about right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a real concern. I think a lot of us have those concerns for how we're being received when we go into the home. And so that was, mostly what we're trying to protect is our image and how customers are comfortable when we enter the home and how they feel about us, while we're there. So thank you for the input. So going forward, wanted to round out some questions here in terms of PPE. And I'll start with you, Doug, because I figure you probably have a little more insight. One of the questions that was asked is it getting easier to find?
Yes. Yeah, big time. And now that I know that restaurants are going to be opening up, they're going to really be needing this stuff. So I started buying it in bulk to the point that it got me nervous. But, the owner of my company said, be smart, get it now. So, yeah, it's definitely available. You just don't look on Prime. You look everywhere else.
Good, good. Have you had any pushback about your techs wearing it? Do they not want to wear it?
Yeah. There's some technicians that don't want to wear it. So if the state of Connecticut or the CDC decided that we have to wear it, then I would probably be in a situation where I would have to ask that technician to have to wear it or not work. So it's very hard to breathe for some of the guys to work, and it's now getting hot out, and they're exhausted and worn out. So that equipment is putting them at risk, right? Touching near their eyes and removing the mask. All those things really worry me a lot.
Yeah, agreed. So I'm going to round this out. I believe we're at 8 o'clock now. Sarah, can you?
We are. I do have a couple questions that have come in, and they could be answered really quickly, if you don't mind, if you guys don't, panelists. There's one that says, I know you have to use your PPP program money for at least 75% of payroll, but if you have money left over at the end of the 2 months, could you use that to, give people a bonus for hazard pay or, somehow like that legally?
Well, first off, the way that was figured, the PPP, loan was based on payroll that you have had in the past, okay? And so the fact that you're having extra money, I'm kind of wondering where that's coming from, unless you had a reduction in your payroll. But I have found nothing that says you can't give your folks, increased pay or bonus, okay? I haven't seen anything. I've looked at the forgiveness loan application. I haven't seen that. So, of course, I've just seen the forgiveness loan application in the last few days. But I don't know of any reason. They're just asking about general payroll. They're not getting into, did you give Johnny a raise or did you give Mary a raise? Okay, so I think it's possible.
Okay, perfect. What about the difference between an EIDL loan and an EIDL advance? And are both funds expected to be reported with the PPP forgiveness application when they reduce the forgivableness of the PPP funds and the EIDL loan amount? That's why I sent it to you in a text so you can read it.
I understand. I got to take it apart. Basically, what we have learned from webinars that we've been to related to all this is you can't double dip. Okay, so you can't be forgiven of money that you're using, that should have gone from the PPP loan, for the EIDL. You can't do that. The EIDL is limited. It's a disaster loan, and it's been there. It's not something new. It's been there. So I don't know all the ins and outs of it. I'm not the last word on this, but I think you got to look at whatever you can get your hands on to keep your business running, okay? And then let's deal with that, the technical fallout later, okay? And that's maybe not a perfect answer, but honestly, that's the answer I think we all have to deal with as we go forward. We're learning as we go, so.
Perfect. And then this would be more of a Renee and Doug, possibly you too, David, question. Legally, can people charge extra for the PPE, for gloves and a mask to the bill? I know it's a free country and you can charge what you want, but people are asking, are there any ramifications for, charging customers, passing this on to the customers?
A while back, I forget the cause or the reason, but we had some issues with shipping, and gas prices went up. And for the first time ever, we initiated sort of a shipping and handling charge that was kind of covering that cost of the gas. Well, let's put it this way. I foresee in the future, it's expensive, and I think that it's a justifiable charge. We haven't done it yet, but we've been talking about it. So, but we did do that with the gasoline surcharge a few years ago, and people were open to it, and I think they'll be open to it now.
Okay. Perfect. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you, Sarah, for adding those questions. I do apologize to everyone for my technical difficulties. It kept me from seeing a lot of things while I was doing this. So I apologize for that, and I hope everybody got something out of this. Thank you to all the panelists. We appreciate your participation. And that's all I have.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And stay tuned for our future ones, and we hope that, you guys will join us.
Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.